The ritual of the contract. The air in the central sanctum was not merely cold, it was stagnant, thick with the iron tang of dry blood and the ozone of old, forbidden magic. David stood at the center of a dais carved from obsidian, his silhouette framed by the flickering, sickly violet light of the manor's internal aura. He held the tome of shadows aloft, its pages pulsing like an exposed heart. "You speak of freedom as if it were a choice," David said, his voice a melodic purr that scraped against the frayed edges of Rachel's sanity. "But freedom is merely the luxury of those who haven't yet seen the strings." Rachel slumped against the cold stone floor, her knees raw, her vision swimming in pulses of crimson. Beside her, Sarah trembled violently, her fingers digging into the dust of the floorboards. Sarah's eyes, usually sharp with pragmatic fire, were clouded, her pupils struggling to focus. "Don't," Sarah whispered, her voice a ragged thread. "Rachel, don't listen to him." "Oh, she's already listening, Sarah," David countered, stepping down from the dais. His boots clicked, a sharp, metronomic sound that seemed to dictate the rhythm of Rachel's thumping heart. She hears the hum beneath the floorboards. She feels the shadows itching under her skin, hungry for a master. "Isn't that right, Rachel?" Rachel tried to pull back, but her body betrayed her. An unnatural lethargy, the sickness of the bite, weighed her down, but beneath it, there was an awakening. A cold, oily sensation coiled in her gut, responding to David's presence with a terrifying, perverse familiarity. "I am not your puppet," Rachel spat, though the defiance died in her throat as a wave of vertigo struck her. David stopped, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. His eyes were devoid of warmth, reflecting only the insatiable boredom of a creature who had seen every version of human suffering. "You are the lead, Rachel. Act accordingly." He gestured with a graceful, long-fingered hand. Two thralls, gaunt, gray-skinned shells of what were once islanders, stepped out from the gloom, dragging a heavy, iron-bound lectern toward them. On it lay the contract, written in ink that seemed to writhe and shift, forming letters that defied the laws of language. "The binding isn't a cage," David continued, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "It's a lens. It takes your messy, chaotic human potential and focuses it into something exquisite. Read it. If you wish for this agony to subside, if you wish to stop Sarah's heart from tearing itself apart in fear, read the lines." Sarah let out a choked sob. "If we do this, we're gone. We're just another part of the manor." "You already are the manor," David corrected. "You just haven't been introduced to yourselves yet." He snapped his fingers. The shadows in the corners of the room surged forward like black syrup, snaking up the legs of the lectern and coiling around the girl's wrists. The touch was freezing, an abyssal chill that bypassed skin and muscle to settle directly into their marrow. Rachel gasped, her back arching. The darkness wasn't just cold, it was intelligent. It felt like 1,000 whispers screaming in a language she understood but couldn't articulate. She looked at the page. The letters didn't just sit on the vellum, they moved, burrowing into her retinas. "I am the vessel," the text seemed to project directly into her mind. "I am the shadow that consumes." "Read," David commanded, the authority in his voice vibrating through the very foundation of the room. Rachel opened her mouth. Her tongue felt heavy, swollen with a metallic taste. "I." Again, David urged, his eyes widening with a feverish intensity. He reached out, his hand hovering over the page, pulsing with a dark, static electricity. "The covenant of the blood tether. The sacrifice of the self for the performance of the ages. Say the words." "I renounce the light," Rachel forced out, the words tasting like ash. Every syllable she spoke felt like a lock clicking shut inside her soul. Beside her, Sarah began to chant, her voice hollow and monotone, stripped of her usual warmth. She was being pulled in, her resistance eroding under the sheer, crushing weight of David's will. "I bind my pulse to the dark," Sarah continued, her voice hitching, tears of black bile streaking her cheeks. "I accept the hunger that defines the night." Louder, David demanded, pacing around them like a predatory bird. Make it art. Let the audience feel the weight of your surrender. Rachel could feel the transformation accelerating. It was a violent, structural change. Her bones groaned, knitting back together with a searing, icy heat. Her humanity, her memories of the island, the smell of salt air, the sound of Sarah's laugh, felt like a faded photograph held over a candle. "I offer my shadows to the director," Rachel shrieked, the words tearing from her throat. As she finished, the room plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. The only thing Rachel could see was the faint, pulsating outline of David, glowing with a parasitic light. She felt a tether, a literal, invisible chain of shadow matter, snap into place, connecting her ribcage to the obsidian dais. She looked over at Sarah. Sarah was staring at her own hands, her fingers lengthening, her nails turning into jagged, translucent claws. Sarah blinked, and for a fleeting second, the old Sarah was there, terrified, broken, horrified. "Rachel," she whispered, her voice small and brittle. But then, the tether tightened. Sarah's expression flattened into a mask of cold, predatory stillness. The panic vanished, replaced by the hollow, echoing hunger of the transition. David stood back, arms spread wide, savoring the silence. "Beautiful. You've let go of the script, and yet, you've never played your parts better." He turned toward the darkened ceiling, as if addressing an audience hidden in the rafters. "Did you see that? The transition is always the most taxing, but the payoff, the absolute surrender of morality to utility. That is where the true horror begins." Rachel felt the shadow tether pull at her. She didn't want to move, but her muscles surged with a sudden, twitching kinetic energy. She was standing before she realized she had stood up. Beside her, Sarah moved with the same fluid, unnatural grace. They were no longer two girls from the mainland. They were extensions of the manor's malice. David tapped the obsidian stone, and a projection flickered to life against the wall, a grainy, night-vision feed of the cellar where the others were being held. Emily was there, pacing, her brow furrowed in concentration. Matt was guarding the door, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. "They think they're planning," David chuckled, his eyes gleaming. "They think they have time. But you too, you are the stars of the final act. And every star needs a stage." He waved his hand, and a heavy iron door at the back of the sanctum groaned open, revealing a dark, labyrinthine corridor that smelled of wet earth and ancient decay. "Go," David commanded, his voice devoid of pity. "There are stragglers in the lower pits. The manor requires sustenance to keep the broadcast clear, and you require the practice." Rachel felt the shadow tether pull, a sharp, physical tug against her spine. She looked at Sarah. Sarah's eyes were locked on the corridor, her pupils dilated until her irises were nothing more than thin rings of steel. "We hunt?" Sarah asked. Her voice was the same, but the cadence was wrong, clipped, efficient, devoid of empathy. "You perform," David corrected. "Show me what you've become." Rachel felt a strange, dual consciousness bloom in her mind. There was the terrified, human part of her, tucked away in the deep, dark corners of her skull, and then there was this new, hungry entity, the shadow wielder, that looked at the dark corridor and saw not a place of fear, but a hunting ground. As she stepped forward into the gloom, her shadow detached from her heels, creeping ahead along the walls like a living, ink-black sentinel. She felt the manor breathe with her, its walls pulsing in sync with her own newfound, cold heart. The performance had begun, and for the first time, she realized with a jolt of existential terror that she didn't know if she could ever step off the stage. The ink of the contract had barely dried on their skin, a stinging, black spiderweb of calligraphy that pulsed in time with their stuttering hearts. Rachel's vision was a smear of grayscale and raw, throbbing crimson. Every breath she took felt like inhaling crushed glass, a jagged reminder that the air she once relied upon was no longer enough. "Beautiful," David murmured. He circled them like a shark in shallow water, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the streaming camera feed mounted in the corner of the ceiling. "The camera loves the transition. The way the light dies in your eyes, it's simply professional." Sarah stood beside her, her hands trembling, though the tremor was changing. Her fingers lengthened, the nails sharpening into ivory needles that clicked rhythmically against the stone floor. She was staring at her own hands with a mixture of revulsion and a terrifying, dawning wonder. "Look at me," David commanded, his voice sharp enough to snap the tension. They turned. David didn't look like a man anymore. He looked like a stage manager standing amidst the debris of a set he'd spent a lifetime perfecting. He gestured toward the far end of the sanctum. A heavy iron door, rusted and weeping with moisture, groaned "Oh."